Hi. So before I start today, I just want to lift up prayer before I talk about my testimony, my witness account of my story, of my encounter of my life before, during and after meeting Jesus. So thank you for watching today, but before we get into it, I would like to lift up a prayer. I want to pray that the words of my witness statements and my testimony of my story articulate beautifully and honestly. I pray that my words resonate within people, and as I open up to my story, not to be judged by people. I give thanks for the skill set and the blessings to be able to share my story beautifully and effectively. In Jesus' name, Amen. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. But living inadequately was something that I grew up feeling. I was born into a normal family, happy family. I've got an amazing mum, an amazing brother, an amazing sister, both older than me. And they are fantastic. My mum had 3 kids. At one point she was working 3 jobs to make sure none of us wanted for nothing. She worked herself into an early retirement, basically. She became quite ill. She's absolutely fantastic, absolutely the best mum you could ever want. And, I thank Jesus every day for blessing me with such a wonderful woman in my life. And my older brother and my older sister, both amazing people, both teachers, both older than me, both fantastic, really amazing at the jobs, inspiring young people, and inspiring me as well. They were both, in their own way, role models in my life. The thing that was lacking in my life mostly was my dad. My dad left when I was about 3 years old, and he actually took away a part of me. When he left, I was too young to understand what was going on, but there was a part of me that felt, for the first time, unwanted and rejected. And at the time, I didn't actually know what I was feeling. I used to get panic attacks when people would leave or something like that, and I'd feel unwanted, and I didn't know what was happening. I really didn't know what was happening, and this followed me all through early life. I did have a happy childhood. I was happy, I was fun, I was going out with my mates, riding bikes, playing in the park. But I started to notice it when I was in school. When I was in primary school, I was, I wouldn't say I was thick or anything like that, but sometimes when explaining something new to me, you had to explain it a few times. And the other kids were just getting stuff straight away, and I wasn't picking it up straight away. And my fear of being seen as thick took over, because it took over my insecurities of being unwanted and being different from the rest of the kids. So I started to try and find a way that I could fit in by living in plain sight, but fitting in as well. So people didn't really see the real anxious, scared, masked me in classrooms. I'd start to mess about because it was easier. I found very quickly that I was quite funny. And it was easier to be funny, and it was easier to be loud, and it was easier then to be noticed. People didn't see me as being insecure or anxious or alone or scared or frightened. They'd see me as being funny, confident, nuts. I wanted to be the crazy kid of the class. I wanted to be that class clown. This was something that followed me all the way through school. High school was different. High school for me was massive. And I remember going into high school, and I remember looking around and just seeing how big everyone was and how tiny I was. And again, I felt so insecure, and I felt so alone, and I felt so small compared to everyone else in the school. And I wanted very quickly to make a name for myself. Now, that doesn't mean make a name for myself by being tough or being hard or as you see on these prison films, going in and taking out the biggest bully. That wasn't me. Because I was anxious and I was scared and I was insecure. My way of making a name for myself was being the funniest in the classroom, being the loudest, being the craziest. I wanted people to recognise me and think, oh yeah, John's funny, John's crazy. I started to become a bully. I started to project my insecurity on other people. People who were weaker than me, people who were hurting probably more than me at the time. They were easy targets for me to be able to project my insecurities, to get other people to look at their insecurities and their faults instead of my own. And this was easy for me. I started to develop a real mask that I could hide behind. I was hiding in plain sight. People weren't seeing the real me, the real anxious, scared me. And my grades were so low, I was in the bottom sets for everything in school. But I didn't care, because for me, school wasn't about learning, school was about performance. It was a performance of every day going in and being crazy, being seen as being funny, being accepted and being loved. Not wanting to be outcasted because I was afraid or insecure or anxious. And like school does, school years flew by. And I started to question really what I was going to do after school, where I was going to go, how I was going to be, what I was going to do for the future. All my friends were planning off going to college and university and going on to do these jobs that they really wanted to do. And I was just terrified because I didn't have a clue what to do. I felt like I wasn't good at anything. I felt like a failure. My brother and sister, who were both older than me, finished school with all the GCSEs, all the A-levels, went off to university and both became amazing teachers. I couldn't do that, and I started to feel like a failure, and I didn't know what to do. The teachers were on my back. My mum was on my back. Family friends would say to me all the time, what are you going to do after school? What are you going to do after school? And the truth is, I didn't know. I was on detention one night, and there was a kid who was older than me, a year above me, and he was getting grilled the same as I got grilled, and they were saying to him, what are you going to do after school? What are you going to do after school? You need to sort it out. You need to get your life sorted. And this kid just said, you know what? I'm going to join the army. And the teachers just left him alone. And in that moment, it planted a seed in me, and I thought, wow, yeah, I'll just join the army. And to me, that sentence, I'll just join the army, I never actually took into consideration actually joining the army, but that became like a fallout for any time anyone ever said, what are you going to do after school? I just said, join the army. I'll just join the army. But I started to look into it, because I think when you start lying to yourself, you want to know all the details, and you want to be able to tell people if they start asking questions about what you're going to do. You want to be able to know what to say. So I did start looking into what it takes to get into the army. And when I seen the infantry, that was, you don't need anything to get into, you didn't need no qualifications to get into, I felt like, wow, this is actually something I can do. Maybe this is something I can do. I'm a lad. I'm hard. I can do it. So I did. I joined the army. And this young 16, 17-year-old lad who thought I was hard, who thought I was confident, who thought no one could see behind the mask of how anxious and afraid I actually was, I'd be okay in the army. And I learned within the first 2 nights that I was very, very wrong. The army took me in, tubed me up, and spat me out. They seen through this fake persona that I was trying to project, and they ripped it apart and broke me down beyond belief. And I couldn't last, and I did come out of the army. But when I come out of the army, I felt like a failure. I had this overwhelming feeling of failing again. The one thing that I was told people that I was going to do, the one thing that I actually felt like my family could be proud of me, and I could learn for the first time in my life how to be a real man, I failed in, and I didn't belong. And I didn't know what to do. So it took me a few years of being on the dole, sleeping on my mum's couch, drinking bottles of vodka every night, smoking cigarettes, going out, to decide what I wanted to do. And eventually I went back to college, and I started to study more. And the college I went to was a performing arts college, because I've always found being the centre of attention becomes easy for me, and I'm able to project, and I'm able to almost hide behind characters that I can create, because it's easier, other than facing my own insecurities and my own anxieties, my own depression. And I didn't even know that I had depression or anxiety. I thought this was just the way I was, because at the time I had no education of it. I thought this is just me. So it's easier for me to go to college and learn how to develop this mask and performing arts to be able to hide behind. It was easier to live how I thought other people wanted me to be. I started going through life in college, being loud, being, again, like I was in school, but even more so because I was just trying to make up for what I lost in the army, that fake mask that I had. I wanted to make that bigger and stronger, so I started to do things. I started to drink, started to smoke. I started to sleep with girls. I started to play around with girls and their emotions. I wanted to be seen as cool by everyone around me. After college, I started to get education on what depression and anxiety was. And I started to realise that this was something that's been with me all of my life, this numbness, this fear of being unwanted, being unseen. But I wanted to be seen, and I wanted people to like me, and I wanted to be funny. So I started doing stand-up comedy. And it's amazing that today I talk about stand-up comedy because it's actually 6 years ago today I started stand-up comedy, and it's amazing that in this room where I'm filming this testimony, I have a brick wall behind me. So it's just a little amazing sign that this is the right timing for this testimony today. I started stand-up comedy, and I was addicted to the freeness of it. I felt free, away from anxiety, away from fears. I was able to talk about my biggest insecurities to people, and people would just laugh. It was like my way of counselling. But for me, comedy took a toll on me because I wasn't able to switch off. When you come off stage, that should be your time done. But for me, the performance carried on through everything I did, through relationships, friendships, jobs that I had. I was always performing, always being funny, always trying to say stuff, being appropriate, push the boundaries of people, make people feel bad. I used to roast people, rip people, make them laugh at themselves. Every day, everything I did was a performance. And as you can probably tell, that doesn't get you far. I was losing jobs, I was losing relationships, and I was losing friendships. I was scared of people getting close to me, the real me. There's only been a few people throughout my life that have got close to me, and I've let them see the real me. But when that happens, I just push them away instantly. There was a girl in school when I was 16 years old, and she got close to me. The first person to ever get close to me and see behind the veil, see behind the mask that I was projecting, and I couldn't handle it. I pushed her away in every way I knew how. And that went on to any relationship I was in. I was projecting this fake image, and any time I got close to showing what I was really like, I just shut it down. Or I'd do ways that pushed them away from me. But comedy for me was an outlet. It always was an outlet, and it was amazing to be able to perform comedy and get up on stage, and for that 10 minutes, 20 minutes, all the anxiety, all the fear, all the depression seemed to go away. I decided to go travelling around the world. I wanted to go to Australia, New Zealand, and America. I wanted to do stand-up comedy all over the world, and I did it. But the more I did it, the more and more it was taking a toll on me, the more the numbness and anxiety and depression was catching up with me. All the performance, all the things that had made me feel like I was in control of my own life in the past were starting to fade away, and the numbness and the anxiety, it doesn't matter where I was, whether I was doing a show in Birkenhead or Liverpool or in Las Vegas, the anxiety, the fear, the numbness was catching up with me. Sometimes I'll talk about anxiety and depression, and I'll always say, I feel like it's 2 steps ahead of me, and there's certain things I do to keep fit, or drink water, or do this, or do that to keep it away from me. But the reality is, for about 6 years of my life, the anxiety was about 10 steps ahead of me, and the depression was 10 steps ahead of me, and the numbness was there, and I didn't feel like I was living my life. I went traveling around the world. I went to some amazing places, but I couldn't really enjoy it because of how numb, how afraid I was. When I came back from travelling, that was when it hit me. Because I didn't really know what I was going to do in my life. I always felt like the black sheep. My brother and sister have gone on to be head teachers at their school. I just felt like the thick one, the idiot. I felt numb. I felt depressed. I started to get suicidal thoughts. And do you know what? It wasn't dramatic. It was never like, oh, I'm going to commit suicide. This is a cry for help. I'm going to cut my wrists, or I'm going to do this. I want to be seen as being depressed. For me, the suicidal thoughts came, and it was a way for me of taking back control of my life. I felt like I decide when it ends. And I did set up a date. I wanted to kill myself. And it wasn't a sudden thing. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to do it tonight, I'm going to do it tomorrow. I actually gave myself a year. And I said, this is it. In this year, I'm going to live like it's my last year. Because in my head it was. I was taking back control and I was deciding when my life ends. And I went to my sister's wedding. And that for me was the day. You know, it was such a celebration to see all my family, to see everyone happy, joyful. And it was an amazing experience. My sister looked absolutely amazing. Her husband is absolutely great. He is a real brother to me. And I remember coming to terms with, okay, well, in a year's time, because I don't want to put a dark cloud on this wedding day. In a year's time, I'm going to kill myself. So I spent that year saying goodbye to things and to people. I was saying goodbye to my families in different ways that they didn't even know. I was saying goodbye to my friends in ways that they wouldn't even know. I felt like my spirits were uplifted with the idea that I knew that my life was going and I was ready to die. And I was almost graduating out of life. That's what I felt. I've done everything that I set out to do. I performed in Las Vegas. I've been around the world. I've had countless girlfriends. I was ready to go. I really was. And it wasn't a depressed, sad, scary feeling for me. I knew it was my time to go in a way. And it didn't feel like I was giving up. It felt like it's just up to me. It's my time. During this year, so much crazy stuff happened in my life. I had a wrong allegation against me in work, where I lost my job and actually went to court. And I got proven not guilty. But that was going against me. I was in a relationship with a girl who at the time was amazing, but I was just projecting this mask, this fake me. It wasn't the real me. And that ended. I lost my flat. And it felt symbolic that everything was ending at the time that I was ready to go. There was no more strings holding me down. One of my friends from school, his name's Joe, he has a prayer group on the Whittle. And I noticed that he's really turned his life around with God. And I thought, you know what, I'll give it a try. Because he'd been asking me a few times to go and see this group. And I thought, you know what, my mind's made up anyway. I'll give it a chance. I'll try. And I went round to this prayer group, and I remember just thinking, wow, these Christians are nuts. These Christians are smiling, they're so happy. No one can be this happy. I was just numb. I was so anxious. I was so afraid. And these guys are all smiling, happy, loving seeing each other, lifting their arms up when they pray. And I'm thinking, these guys are crazy. And I thought, nah, this isn't for me. I don't believe in God. If God was real, then why do I feel like this? Why do I feel so alone? Why do I feel so anxious? Why do I feel so afraid? Nah, it's not for me. So it came to the night where I was ready to die. I had a suicide note written, had the mix of medication of how I was going to do it. It was in a bathroom in a house in Wavertree. Yeah. And I was ready. I said goodbye to everything in my own way. And that was it. I was ready to go. And when I was in the bathroom and I was stood there and I had the drink in my hand and I just said again. And it wasn't a cry for help. It was more of a cocky thing. I was like, do you know what, God? If you're real, now's the time. But if you're not, then fair play. And in that moment, I heard a voice in my head. Like me speaking to you now. And I heard a voice and it said, you don't need to die for me, because I've already died for you, and you need to live for me. And I started to question that, and I started to argue back. I said, why me? I'm no one. I'm terrified. Just let me go. I'm ready to go. My mind's made up. I don't want to live like this anymore. And he said, but I've redeemed you. I've called you by name. You are mine. And in that moment, I felt something come over me. I felt emotion for the first time in 4 years, and I started crying. And I felt this like real warmth inside me, and I didn't know what was happening. I was just exhausted. I didn't know anything that was going on. I was crying. I was being sick. The adrenaline was going over. It was like stage 5 anxiety. I was exhausted. I didn't know what happened. I just went to lie down on the bed, and I woke up the next day to my friend Joe calling me. He told me that he was picking up paint in Liverpool because he works as a decorator. And I went out, and I didn't even tell him anything that had happened the night before. And he said to me, listen, bro, I felt it on my heart that you're going to get baptized this weekend. So have a think and let me know. And it was just amazing. Absolutely amazing. How just marvel not, all the signs that come after that were just unbelievable. I could feel God in my life. I could feel Jesus in my life. For the first time, I could feel something. I could feel emotion. I started to get feelings back. And I wanted to know more. So I joined the fellowship group that Joe ran. And I started to learn more about it. And I started to feel Jesus more. But then I started to feel him less. Because I was still doing things on my terms, on my way of doing it. I was still seeking validation in all the wrong places. I started to think that I must be with God because of what I'm wearing or what I'm not eating or what days I'm celebrating on. I was knowing God on my terms, on what I can do. And I didn't feel Jesus in my life anymore. But I was searching for it because I knew and I felt it was real. He saved me from suicide. So I spent 6 to 8 months trying to find this feeling again by my own works, but I was falling short because that's what we do so beautifully and wrongly. We fall short of the grace of God. And I made mistakes along the way. I was seeking validation in the wrong places. I judged people, I hurt people, but I was still going on my own works. I went to an Alpha course in St. James in the city in Liverpool. And it's an amazing course to do, Alpha. If anyone's curious about God, I recommend looking up an Alpha course because you can go ask questions freely and hear other people asking questions as well. Sometimes the same questions that you're thinking or a different way of looking at it, and it's absolutely amazing. And I went into this place with judgments. I went in with the certain clothes that I was wearing, that I keep a certain day, that I follow a different law. And I was judging people, and I thought, oh, well, I must be closer to God. He hasn't even got a Bible out. What's going on? But then something happened, and the worship started, and the music started, and I could see people around the room praising Jesus and being in love with Jesus, and I could feel Jesus in this room again. And I started to realize for me, it was a relationship over religion. And it's not by my works, it's by his. I was so confused. After the Alpha course, I was speaking to a vicar called Jude. And he said to me, are you reading the Bible? And I said, yeah. Well, I'm reading, Deuteronomy, which is a fantastic book. And he says, yeah, well, why don't you try reading the Gospels and Paul's letters? So I did, and I tried it, and I went home, and I heard a voice again, and I heard a voice say, follow me. And that was when I knew that I needed to submit everything that I am. It's not by my works, by what I wear or what I do or how I think, but it's by his. That I need to follow him by giving my life to him. And in that moment, through prayer, I stopped being mine, and I stopped being me, and I became his. It was in that moment I stopped being depressed, and I stopped being anxious, and I stopped living in fear. For the first time in 29 years, I started living in love, real love. Love for God, love for Jesus, and love for my neighbour. And for the first time ever, love for myself.